workshop the week after with some of the tips. They were quite interesting, and so we'll see where that goes tonight. But let's give Jonti a big welcome, yeah? Jonti.
Thank you.
Great to have you, man. So you just landed.
Thank you. Yes, yesterday morning.
Okay, cool. So we'll have a chat and then we'll throw it out to the floor if anybody wants to ask questions.
Sure.
About an hour and a half, yeah? Okay. So tonight's topic is how to be the best lover you can be. And I wanted to ask you, in all the wealth of experience that you have, to kind of touch on a few, I suppose, some of the moments that have just blown you away in the whole Tantra world, where you've gone, where it's taken you up a notch in terms of your relationships. If you could maybe cite 2 or 3 key moments that you went, wow, I've just got a real high level teaching here.
Okay, that's beautiful. And thank you for the opportunity and everybody who came to share with us. It's really cool to see you again.
You too, man.
I think something that you said in the meditation that really resonated, that changed so much for me, was about dropping into the heart center. So when sex becomes more about heart than anything else, and when it comes from the heart, that's where so much changes. And that realization on its own changed so much of the way that I teach, so much of the way that I experience pleasure. That was a really, really huge one. And then what becomes really interesting is looking at the question that the topic poses. What does it mean to be a really good lover? What does it mean to be an awesome lover? And that's a fascinating question, because it's a question that has layers and layers and layers that keep expanding, that keep revealing themselves. And that's very interesting. So to understand that for most of us, that starts out as a sexual skill. So if I can give my partner better orgasms, then I'm an amazing lover. And dropping through that and dropping through that and dropping through that to understand that actually the greatest power in that is intimacy. So how does intimacy become an expression in our sexuality? And very often that doesn't have a lot to do with sex itself, or not sex as we think it is. So it's not always about kind of the penetration. It's about so much more than that, understanding the fullness of that, and understanding that the fulfillment is in the intimacy more than in anything else. And then understanding that sex is much more of an energy experience, that the physical is a portal and a doorway into the energy.
It's good, isn't he? Does he need a microphone, do you think? Or can you hear him okay? Yeah. Look what I made earlier. Now I'll project. Okay, so you're grand with me. And the sound in that is still coming through. Do you want to turn that off? The music? Just turn it, Brendan will turn it off.
Is that working? Yes.
Yes, perfect. That's perfect. Just a little feed on the music coming through. So let's go into the whole vibe of intimacy, yeah? So how do you cultivate intimacy?
So that's the key. There's a beautiful concept in Tantra that the answer is in the question. So it's a cultivation. So it's understanding that intimacy is something that we learn to drop into because it has layers and layers and layers. And it's through the practices that we're able to become more intimate, more intimate, more intimate. And then understanding the elements of intimacy, understanding the depth of intimacy, the subtlety, the nuance of intimacy, and how intimacy is so much about revealing ourselves, and in the revelation of ourselves, how we connect with a partner in that way. So we do that by cultivating it, by understanding that there are practices of intimacy. So for example, last time we were together, we sat looking into each other's eyes for a couple of minutes, which was a really beautiful and very connecting experience. So that's the first level of intimacy. Then understanding that intimacy is very much about us more than about our partners. So I will be as intimate in any given moment, in any situation, as I am willing to be, as I choose to be, and hopefully you will meet me there and you will match me. But if intimacy is dependent on you, if intimacy is dependent on somebody else, There's a problem in that because it's always going to be a limitation because we might not be met in that way. So I will be as intimate as I choose to be.
So you mean it always just begins with you?
That's it.
You've to do it without any expectation.
That's right. And the next level
Yeah.
on that is we look at intimacy in a very limited way, which means we often see intimacy with a lover, for example, where every moment in life actually is an invitation of intimacy. So how intimacy can I be with my body? How intimate can I be with my breath? How intimate can I be with my senses? How intimate can I be with somebody in the grocery store? Because it's about connection. And that comes back to making it about me. So the more intimately that I choose to live, the more intimate I can be with a partner, with a lover.
Okay, so you're cultivating it in daily life.
That's it. So sex is not different from life. So for most of us, sex is in this little box that we take out in very specific circumstances, in a very specific context. We use it and then we put it away again. Instead of understanding that sex is life and life is sex. And more I see the way that we live is the way that we experience pleasure. The way we experience pleasure is the way that we live. It's not separate from everything else.
So in your local spa tomorrow morning, you're going to be very different, okay? You're going to be giving it the full
But it's that simple because there's somebody behind the till who's taking your money, okay? So to really look into that person's eyes and really just say, thank you. But that moment of connection, instead of just thank you, which is what we do, and then we kind of go off into the day, but to take a moment to connect with that. And the more that we can do that, the more we're becoming intimate. So it's not a question of intimacy as something that we do, it's intimacy as something that we are. That's what makes the difference.
And it's the slowing down as well that's so important.
Yeah, because those moments are the moments of slowing down. So in terms of becoming a good lover, becoming an amazing lover, that's about becoming something inside of you. So it's an expression of being rather than an expression of doing. And
you know, when people hear, I don't know what people feel when they hear this, but has anybody here ever done eye gazing or anything like that, or really kind of slowed down and done these kind of practices? Some people have, okay. So is there a vulnerability that arises when somebody has to do this? Because does it bring fear, you know, into some people when they hear this?
of course it does. And it's interesting because it's kind of one of the most basic practices.
Yeah, it seems pretty simple.
So first you learn to breathe. First tantric practice is about breath. Second is about the eyes. And the interesting thing is that is one of the most intimate practices. And it's something that on so many workshops, so many people struggle with because it's so revealing. So if you want to be an amazing lover, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And if you want to be intimate, intimacy is vulnerability. Because that's the language of connection. That's the place that we reveal ourselves. So there's an interesting thing about eye gazing. And it's not so much about looking into someone's eyes, it's as much about being seen. Because everything in this is a dialogue, it's a relationship, it's a conversation. So it's not just me looking at you, it's as I'm looking at you and as I'm looking into you, it's allowing myself to be seen in that. And if I'm going to be seen, then I'm going to be seen with everything that I am, with the power and the magnificence that I am, as well as the fear, as well as the vulnerability, as well as everything that makes up who I am. Yeah. And that's the place that we meet.
When you do the eye gazing, after a while, you kind of melt into it a bit, and you realize that you're looking at yourself in a way.
That's it.
You see yourself in the other person.
That's it. And you know, there's the first tantric greeting. So a lot of tantric experiences begin with a formal greeting. The point of the greeting is we come into the space as lovers, which means all of the other roles in life we kind of leave behind. And in that greeting, the words of the greeting is that I'm greeting you as I'm greeting myself. Because from a tantric perspective, and let's just do this for a second, there are two streams of tantra in the world, and it's important to acknowledge that. So the first is, as soon as we hear the word tantra, we connect that with sex. And that's something more that's called neo-tantra, which is much more the sexual side of it. Traditional tantra is a spiritual practice that's been, or a spiritual tradition, that's been around for over 6,000-7,000 years, which makes it one of the oldest in the world. And it's had a continuous lineage of teachers, of learning, of practices. And one of the principles of this is that there's only one of us in the whole universe. And that's you. And that everybody is an expression of you for you to experience yourself in all of the different ways that you do. So we have a relationship that at times might be a little infuriating, and at times it's absolutely wonderful and fabulous and easy. All of that allows us to experience each other in different ways. So there's just you. So when we do this greeting, it's very simply that I'm experiencing and I'm greeting myself in you. So how about we do a heart salutation? Yes?
Okay.
Because it's a nice small group of us and nice and intimate. So sit next to a somebody, whoever the somebody might be.
Carla, you get... Oh, you have someone.
So you guys can have a threesome there at the...
Don, you're in a threesome.
Don, just join the threesome. Does Don have a thing against threesomes?
Not in the slightest.
I'm just asking. Okay.
Don probably invented threesomes.
Okay. Okay. Heart salutation. So I'll say this quite loud because it's a bit hard to do with the... Well, we can do it like this. Okay. So you're going to look into your partner's eyes. And you're going to take a couple of deep breaths in and out. And then you bring your hands up to your heart center in a prayer position. And your hands come forward to touch. And then I'm going to say, I acknowledge you as an aspect of myself. So one of you is going to say that. I acknowledge you as an aspect of myself. And then your partner will say the same thing to you.
I acknowledge you as an aspect of myself.
And then if you're comfortable, lean forward so your foreheads touch. And just take a few breaths and feel the connection. And slowly move apart. Thank you. Good. How did that feel? Okay.
Still one going on.
Mm-hmm. So what that does really is it opens the ritual. And the term that we use for the tantric and more conscious experiences is a ritual. And a ritual is something that's separate from everything else that we do. So we come into it with a different awareness, a different consciousness, there's a different intention, there's a purpose. And the greeting opens the experience. But essentially, when I say I acknowledge you as an aspect of myself, it's about the oneness between us.
So the one big thing about Tantra is the whole aspect of ritual and the whole aspect of a sacred space. So the bedroom becomes a place of play, a place of sacredness, and a place where nothing is off limits within the boundaries of the two people taking part. You know what I mean? The consent is obviously a huge part of it, you know. But talk about the creation of the sacred space within Tantra.
So that's really important, and it goes a lot to bringing the intention to an experience and to bringing us into a different space. So when we create the space, we're creating it with the awareness of a space for play, for whatever it is that we might be doing. So the first thing is to understand that there are physical elements of creating a space, and there's what they actually mean, what they represent. And the first one is this: you have to be warm. If you are not warm, you cannot be present. You know, a while ago I worked with a couple, and they came to learn some things. And after a couple of weeks, I said, well, what's happening? What's changing? They said, nothing. And it was the middle of winter. So winter in Johannesburg is a little bit different to the middle of winter in Ireland. But still, we get cold. I mean, at the moment, the nights are, you know, temperature goes down to about 4 degrees. Anyway, they came into my studio, and she was wrapped up in all of these layers, and he was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and a tracksuit top and slip-slops. And I said, what's the temperature in your bedroom? And she said, it's freezing. And I said, well, why don't you put a heater on? And as soon as they did that, so much changed. Here's the thing. We have to be present in this. If we're not comfortable, we can't be present. So you have to be warm is so important. Such a simple thing, but it's a huge thing. Light one candle, light 100 candles. It creates beautiful atmosphere. If you like incense, light incense. You can put flower petals everywhere. Flower petals stain your sheets, by the way, rose petals. So either go to a hotel or go to an Airbnb, or have sheets that you know you don't mind if they get stained. Music can be a fabulous part of the experiences. Generally, you don't want your favorite love songs, and you don't want instrumentals of your favorite love songs, because you're singing the songs in your head. So you want something that's there, you know, meditation music, yoga music, even some of the music from some of the events that you've done can be really cool. Some chanting can be absolutely fabulous. You can have crystals, you can have shells, you can have an altar with pretty much anything that you like. And it's a fabulous excuse to go shopping, because a lot of good experiences involve shopping. Well, you can buy candles, you can buy cushions, all the things that you're going to use just for these experiences. And you can make it really simple. You can light one candle. It doesn't have to be such a complex thing. But when you're doing this, what you're saying is that we're coming into the experience with a different intention. That's what the creation of the space is. And it can be a beautiful temple that you create. And it can be simple. But when you do that, you're making an act of separation to bring ourselves into presence. That's what's really important.
And then within the space, then there are some really good practices. We spoke about eye gazing. One that I love is awakening the senses. The ones where you awaken the taste, you awaken the smell, and you do it for your partner, and then she does it for you, or vice versa.
So I got a fabulous experience for you tonight
Okay,
of awakening the senses.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we're all going to do this. Actually prepared for this. So you're going to hold that for a second, please.
You never know what it's going to do.
So you're going to choose a grape.
Okay.
And we're going to pass this around, and everybody is going to take one grape. Just hold it in your hand.
Everyone's wondering what he's going to do with the grape, right?
Well, you still got your clothes on, so you're safe for now. So, everybody get a grape, and you're just going to hold it in your hand. Give your grape a name if you like. Grapey. I'm not saying where my mind goes with that one, Don. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so this is how a grape can awaken your senses. So the first thing is just look at the grape and maybe hold it up to the light and look at the color of the grape and look at the color of the skin, and can you see inside the grape? And look at the shape of the grape. Look at the contours of the grape. And then feel the grape in your fingers. Feel the texture of the skin. And if you hold it on the sides or you hold it on the ends, that feels different. The weight of the grape, however subtle that might be. And then roll the grape around in your fingers and feel the texture of the skin of the grape. And then really gently squeeze, but really gently, so there's just that little bit of resistance. And feel how soft or firm your grape is in that awareness. And then bring the grape to your nose. Does the grape have a smell? And very often, if where the stem was, if you squeeze that a little bit, you'll get a subtle scent of the grape. And now, can you roll the grape around on your lips and feel the texture of the grape on your lips? And if you lick the skin of the grape, how does that feel? Licking on the outside of the grape. And if you put the grape in your mouth and just roll the grape around inside your mouth, feel the smoothness of the skin on your tongue, on your palate, maybe on your cheeks. And then hold the grape in your fingers. And if you feel where the stem is, just peel a little bit of that skin back. Okay, well, some of us just rush to the end, you see. We're not interested in the experience. Here's another grape. And if you peel the skin back, can you look at the texture of the flesh of the grape? So when you've peeled that and there's a little bit of the skin exposed, then you put your tongue onto that little bit of the inside of the grape. And it's just a little taste of the grape. And if you put the grape in your mouth, you gently squeeze it with your teeth. Feel the springiness of the grape. And can you really slowly bite into the grape so it releases some juice, some flavor, but really slowly. And feel the texture of the flesh of the grape. how the taste of the grape fills your mouth. Well, how slowly can you eat this grape, tasting everything that there is and being aware of the texture, the feeling of the grape. So hopefully you're never going to look at grapes in the same way again.
I think I'm in love with that grape.
Yeah.
Who ate their grape? Okay.
But you see how that can awaken all of your senses.
Yeah. So that's a practice you can do on your own.
Absolutely.
Okay. And when doing that with a partner, talk about it when you do it with a partner, and not necessarily with the grape, but the other things you can bring into the practice.
So if you think about all of our senses, what are our senses? It's not a rhetorical question. We're having a discussion.
Touch, taste, smell, sight,
Sound.
mental images.
So if you think about all of our senses, what would be representative of the senses? So for smell, for example, you could have a cinnamon stick. I use that in a lot of ritual, which is a really beautiful smell. You could have a piece of ginger, anything that has a smell. Cinnamon, just fabulous. It's an easy one. It's accessible to everybody. For the sense of touch, you could have some rose petals. You could have a piece of fabric. Think about taste, could be so many things. You know, I really love chocolate, so really good quality dark chocolate becomes an amazing experience of that. For sound, you can have a little bell, you can have a little gong, and it doesn't have to be like a really fancy Tibetan bell, or it could be anything. You could have 2 sticks of wood that can make a sound, so it could be anything. A blindfold for these experiences can be absolutely amazing because it heightens the senses. So to blindfold your partner, to sit in front of them, and very, very slowly to start with maybe the sense of smell, to just kind of waft the cinnamon stick under their nose. You can use
And
some...
is it a good idea for it to be a surprise?
Sure,
You know what I mean?
absolutely, because you can each prepare your own little kind of tray of this.
Okay, so you have them all here behind you.
That's it.
Okay, I like it.
Because part of it is the anticipation, and you don't know what's there. So if I run something along your lips, and you might be expecting a piece of chocolate, but it might be a piece of ginger today, for example.
And what's the purpose of this, though? What does it awaken? You know, when you take this time and you do this and you awaken all these senses, it heightens the experience, right?
Absolutely, and it brings us more into presence with our senses. So one of the biggest things in changing our sexual experience is to get out of the idea of the goal. And years ago, when this dropped for me, that was where so much changed, and that was really one of the most important moments in this. So for most of us, sex is an experience of the end. And we do so much because we want to get to the end. So much of our experience is actually about 15 or 20, 30 seconds of the release of an orgasm. So we might spend who knows how long begging and pleading to have sex and taking you out for coffee and buying you flowers and all sorts of things for 15 seconds of pleasure. It doesn't quite add up. But if we get out of that idea of the goal and we get into the fact of the experience and being present in the experience, we start to feel everything that's happening. We feel the sensations, we feel the emotions, we feel what's present in our bodies, we feel the energy. So becoming more sensually aware brings us more into the body. So it brings us more into our senses. So the more sensually sensitive that we are, the more I'm going to feel where my hand is on your skin, and I'm going to feel your skin under that. that moment, that presence, is a world. And bringing ourselves into that becomes so important. So the more we become sensually aware, the more of those moments we're aware during lovemaking, during sex. More aware of smell, of sensation, of feeling, of taste, of touch. So it's back to that idea of the sensitivity of the experience.
You know, when you talk about the 15 seconds, it's not a long time, is it? 15 seconds. When you talk about 15 seconds and the goal, you know, so weave into that now the masculine and the feminine. So the way the woman or the feminine spirit would approach. The men are very much going in with that type. That's something you have to really deprogram in your head.
That's it.
Right?
So for men, we've been so conditioned to the idea of the orgasm, because every time we've had sex, pretty much from the time we started touching ourselves at whatever age that was, we had an orgasm. So it's pretty much a guarantee for a man in an experience. And as fabulous as orgasms are, they're also a limitation and sometimes a trap. So the trap is that it becomes the focus of the experience, which means we're doing whatever it is that we have to do to get here. So we don't stop and look around, we don't see, we don't feel whatever's happening in the moment. It's all about getting there. So if our focus is there, then we're actually not present, because our focus is whatever we have to do to get there. And more times than not, that has a whole lot of fantasies. Because here's an interesting thing. Can you have a sexual experience without having a fantasy? And for most of us, that's incredibly difficult. Men more than women, because we're so conditioned to the thoughts that we need to get us to that point. So when everything slows down, when we stop everything, that's where we actually start to feel, and we get out of that need for the orgasm. And it is a huge reprogramming. So kind of the framework of my work is how much we live and we work in patterns. So the easiest way to understand that is every time you brush your teeth in the same way. You bath or shower, you wash in the same way, you eat in the same way. Sexually and in relationship and in life, we do exactly the same thing. And because for most of us, sex is the part of life that we talk about the least, that's the most subconscious. We simply do what we do in the way that we do it because it works, or we think it works, or it's what we know. And that's how we have sex. As soon as we kind of slow everything down, as soon as we stop, we start thinking about, well, what is this experience? What does it mean to be a really good lover? And what is it that I want today? Because when we just have sex in this pattern, it's pretty much the same way every single time. So we kiss and we touch, and I lick your boobs, and I lick you, and you suck me, and we have sex. And maybe there's an orgasm for everybody involved, but it's about the goal.
Everyone in the audience.
There we go. So we get into this idea of the goal. And as soon as we can change the pattern of that, when we can start to be present, so for men, that's a huge mind shift. Because it's about presence and it's about the experience, it's not about the orgasm.
And this pattern that, you know, a lot of people in long-term relationships, they get into that pattern, they figure out what they both like. Even if they're into Tantra, they'll weave the Tantra in to slow it all down. But eventually, they're going to get to the payoffs that they both like. How do you break those patterns?
Well, finding out the fact that maybe there's a bigger payoff.
Okay.
So if the payoff is the orgasm, that's quite a short-lived experience.
So give me a bigger payoff than that. There is one.
How about a full-body orgasm?
Okay. This is where you got my interest, you know.
So full-body orgasm starts to become very, very different experience to... How long is the orgasm most of us have? We've spoken about this.
For a woman, how long is
You
it?
said 15 seconds, but I beg to differ.
Yeah, for
Okay.
a woman, it's longer than 15.
Yeah, but it's not a whole lot longer.
I don't know.
Okay, so there's different kinds of orgasm. Let's have a digression here for a moment. How many kinds of orgasm can a woman have?
6.
6. Can you name the 6, or is that just like a...
Clitoral, vaginal, I don't know, I can't remember the other one. Anal, there's something in between there.
Well, in between... So, in the world of Tantra, we call a vagina a yoni, Y-O-N-I.
Yeah.
Yoni means sacred place, sacred space. So in between your yoni and your anus is your perineum. So I'm being quite literal there, but I think you meant something else.
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
I remember reading that there's like 6 or something.
Is there an amount on this?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's actually a limitless amount. But here's the thing. You can have clitoral orgasms, you can have G-spot orgasms, you can have A-spot orgasms, you can have P-spot orgasms, you can have cervical orgasms, you can have blended orgasms, you can have K-spot orgasms. And then we get into the fact that you can have expanded orgasmic experiences which can last for 2 or 3 hours. We spoke about that last time.
We did.
You can have anal orgasms, you can have perineal orgasms, you can have breast orgasms, you can have eargasms, and you can have toegasms, because it's about being more orgasmic. So once all of these things in your body start to wake up, then you can have so many different kind of experiences. The clitoral orgasm is the contractive orgasm. So as we get closer to that, everything in our bodies get tight. Muscles get tight, breathing gets quick. Then you have this big explosion and you scream or shout, or if you're the quiet type, you just go, ooh, that was nice, and that's all. But if we understand that there can be a whole body orgasmic experience, that's very different to an orgasm. So the payoff becomes a whole lot bigger, because the genital orgasm is very contractive, short-lived. But if it's your whole body, that's a whole different story. And if you can be in an orgasmic state for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, that becomes a very, very different experience.
So you're working with the body as a whole canvas instead of the same bits all the time.
Yeah.
You're working with everything, yeah. And when you say a woman is unlimited, is a man also unlimited?
In a different way.
Okay.
So for men, it's about dropping deeper and deeper and deeper into that inner space, into the connection between heart and genitals. So the tantric word for a cock is a lingam, L-I-N-G-A-M, and lingam means staff of life. So if you take that quite literally, this is an expression of life. So it's not about creating life, it's about the experience of the wholeness of life. That starts to become very different. So what happens if your lingam, if your cock could be an expression of life that can penetrate your partner's heart? So what happens if I'm inside my lover and I can extend that energy through her yoni to penetrate her heart? That becomes a totally different world of experience for both of us.
Let's try that now. Will we pair it? That's beautiful, man. I like that. So you're connecting with the heart center.
That's it.
Okay.
So what happens if her heart, if her yoni can draw me in? So this is really interesting. For most women, penetration is quite a passive experience in terms of that it's done to you. You are being penetrated. But when the sexuality of a woman and this fire starts to wake up, instead of it being a passive thing for a woman, it becomes a totally different experience, because she can draw the energy of that lingam in. She can welcome it in. She can draw that all the way up to her heart. That becomes a whole different experience. Then there's a oneness in that, because the boundaries of who we are totally melt and disappear. And then the ultimate union is there. And that's one of the kind of points of a tantric experience, is the union. So we feel that in orgasm, and it's one of the reasons that we chase orgasm, because in those 15 seconds we just kind of disappear. And that's kind of the union. But if we can make that union a more conscious experience, that becomes very different.
Have you ever had an extended energy orgasm in your body?
Yes, I have.
How long has it gone on for?
Oh, what was the last time, my love? This is my love, by the way. Gabby's sitting right there.
demonstration on the stage. Gabby, what's the longest one you've given this man?
Yeah. And then you're just in the space for 2-3 hours or days of this incredible energy and bliss.
And you see sexual power, you know, and that force can be used in life, in manifestations, in creation, because sex and spirit are really one.
Yeah, and sex and life are one. That's what we were talking about.
Yeah. And
so
we've tabooed the bejesus out of it all across the world. We've tabooed it in this country massively. We need to stop tabooing it, right?
yeah. So in a way, we need
to bring it into the light.
Yeah. And we need to make it very normal. We need to make having sex, having pleasure, talking about sex as normal as talking about grocery shopping in a way. So it's kind of a little bit of a paradox because we need to keep it special and we need to make it very normal. And very often we need to be able to have conversations about sex that are firstly very detailed. So very often when we talk about sex, we don't talk about the detail. We talk about the general things.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. And especially men, you know, firstly they talk about how big their cocks are. They talk about how many orgasms I made you have the night before, about how many women, about all of these wonderful things, which are just kind of these ego stories, you know. But we don't talk about the detail, and the detail is where the importance is.
Where it's at,
Yeah.
And now just a little bit on masculine in its wholeness, in its divine presence, and feminine in her divine presence. Like how they turn up differently, and when they're in their wholeness, what the qualities are, you know. I love that vibe about, particularly the masculine, because the masculine, I think the feminine is really rising, and it's really in a good place, I would say, the feminine. But the masculine is still finding its feet. So talk to us about both of those genders in their really, you know, their optimum state.
So the masculine, more than anything else, holds the space. So if you put that in traditional Tantra terms, Shiva is the expression of the masculine, Shakti the expression of the feminine. So Shiva is the space that all of life happens in, which means that the masculine holds the space for the feminine. So the masculine holds the space for that feminine fire, the feminine chaos, the feminine creation, the feminine wildness, the feminine voice of life, which expresses itself in so many ways. So one of the biggest things for men to learn is to not be reactive. So when a man can hold that space, that doesn't mean that you don't show emotion. It doesn't mean that you're not involved. It doesn't mean that you're detached, which so many men have become. It means that we feel, but it's not a reaction. It's not a drama. And to do that, you have to be in a space of quietness inside of yourself. You have to be in the fullness of yourself.
You hear a lot of men say, oh, you know, she's crazy, or she's going through this, or she's having a wobble, or this kind of thing. And in a way, that's not holding space, you know?
No, it's not, because it's understanding that whatever a woman might be experiencing is the fullness of her expression in that moment. So to be able to hold the space for that becomes so important. And that's not being reactive, it's not being in the drama, but it's holding that and saying, whatever it is that you bring is welcome. And in the same way that, you know, we've become, in traditional Tantra, there's actually very little about masculine and feminine. It's very much kind of a Western psychology concept more than a traditional Tantric concept. Because from a traditional Tantric perspective, everything is within us. So for example, a huge part of the traditional, the real feminine, is the power of destruction.
Feminine is the power of destruction.
Because the feminine has the power of creation. If the feminine has the power of creation, she has the power of destruction.
Distraction or
Destruction.
Destruction. Okay.
Distraction is the biggest thing that takes us out of presence. So like that's where orgasm often becomes a distraction, because it takes us out of being present.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand how feminine can create because she gives birth. Or how does she destroy?
So look at what happens in a woman's body every month, for example, with a period. It's this constant cycle of birth, of death, of rebirth. And we hold the space for that.
The masculine holds the space.
That's it. So I don't know about what happens in Ireland, but in South Africa you have at the moment so many festivals with all these little kind of goddesses running around at age 24, and I'm the goddess of this, and I'm the goddess. But how much have you actually destroyed? How much of that power and that fire have you really felt and allowed as a woman? That's what we've suppressed for so long. Because the rise of the patriarchal, the Judeo-Christian religions have been so much about the suppression of that female sexuality. Like, you want to control everything, control female sexuality. Because the power of the goddess is the power of love, it's the power of creation. And we often think that women are much less sexual than men. But think about this. Once a man, for most men, once they've had an orgasm and an ejaculation, they're pretty much done.
Sleep.
And my joke is, that's it. My joke is it should be called going, not coming, because after that, he just wants to fall asleep. But often that's when a woman is just starting with this fire. So the sexual capacity of a woman is often so much more than the capacity of a man. So for a man, learning to control his energy, to harness his energy, becomes so important. And that's where for men we kind of got to get out of the idea of just the orgasm into the possibility of presence, of the experience.
So we've talked a bit about this before, so we'll go into the male for a second and just ask, how could a man start to cultivate that, get away from the 15 seconds and start to make it more of a process? How does he cultivate this extended energy orgasm?
So it's a process, and it doesn't happen in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's really important. You know, a lot of what we live in a world of incredibly quick fix. We live in a world of immediacy. You send me a message, your expectation is that I'm going to reply in 5 minutes. 30 seconds, never mind, 5 minutes. So we live in this world of absolute immediacy. And the immediacy takes us out of the experience, and it takes us out of understanding that this is kind of it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's actually a lifelong journey. So as I learn more and more about sexuality, I learn more and more about my sexuality. But that's the result of years of experience. And we can learn that by firstly slowing down. That's the first thing. Because for men, generally, like once we get inside, that's all we want to do is just kind of, like a jackhammer. Because that's what you see in porn. It's like, how quickly, how fast, can I pound away till I have this orgasm? So slow down. And then stop. And then breathe. And as soon as you do that, you start to feel more of your body. You start to feel more sensation in your body. You start to be more aware of the energy of your body. So that's the first step. And then it's learning how to have an experience without having an orgasm. And it's not that you shouldn't have orgasms. Orgasms are fabulous, there's no question. And they do so much for us, and they're wonderful. And as a man, you can learn to have different kinds of orgasm. But get out of that idea and get into the idea of the experience. And if you can do that, and if you can not have an orgasm, and be with that energy for a day or so. How does that feel in your body? So the first level for most men is frustration. Because where's this orgasm? And that's what my body's so used to, and that's what my mind is so used to. But it's the pattern more than anything else. As soon as we can start to change that, we can start to feel, how does that feel in my body? What happens when I can actually keep some of that energy in my body? Because maybe I'm going to be a little bit more alive. And there's a little bit more vitality inside of me, and maybe there's a little bit more creativity. We've spoken about some of these things and some of the experiences that you shared, for example, from Thailand and things like that. They allow us to really go into a different level of experience. And if I'm going to be there, can I be orgasmic rather than having an orgasm? So can I have this whole body experience? And that starts to change.
Well, when you spoke
things.
earlier about, the staff of light and sending the energy into the heart, I think when for the male to move the energy from here into his heart center while he's engaging is a very good move as well. But some men find that difficult because they feel they lose their power then,
Yeah, so that's the learning. And it's understanding that sex is a practice. So to have higher sexual experiences means we actually have to practice. So how do we learn anything as humans? Any idea how we learn? I'm sorry?
Repetition.
That's it. We learn through repetition. Absolutely. That's the only way that we learn anything as humans, is repetition. So the more that we practice these things, the deeper the experience becomes.
So there will be some homework for everybody when you leave here tonight. I think you know what it is. So do we want to do another little practice, or are we going to have a few questions in a minute? Anybody got any questions? Brewing already? Good man. Let's do a little bit on questions, will we, for about 10 or 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so go ahead, Lloyd.
So, since Paul put on these talks, and there have been several teachers come to speak to us and so on, and I've been following them on Instagram, social media, and so on. And possibly with the exception of yourself, they're all single and have no kids. And so, it's a bit of a different world when you don't have kids and you don't have a partner who you live with nappies and other shit that annoys you all. It causes you to come out of the present moment on a regular basis. So there's a lot of time to explore when you don't have these responsibilities. So I'd like you maybe to talk to that a little bit, as I'm assuming in a relation possibly with children, I don't know.
Sure. So I have all of those things. I mean, my daughter's grown up, but still, I have all of these things and a relationship. So I think I can kind of speak a little bit on that. Just a little bit of authority.
Yeah, you've done that obviously, but people do, what Lloyd is saying is very, because most people will say, you have a baby, the whole thing goes out the window, all the routines are gone. How do you navigate a sex life within that, the tantric experience?
It's quite simple. You make time. Full stop. You make time, you book time, and you commit to the time. Here's the thing about time. We have time for everything, or we have time for nothing. But the simple thing is, if you have time to have breakfast, if you have time to work, if you have time to shop, if you have time to sit in front of a computer, if you have time to watch however much Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is that you do, and you have time for pottery, and you have time for gym, and you have time for yoga, and you have time for everything else, you have time for pleasure, and you have time for intimacy. The thing about it is to create experiences that fit into that. So for example, the practice that we did of the heart salutation and eye gazing, in 5 minutes you can have a really beautiful and a deep connection with your partner. So it's making the time to have that. And more I teach micro practices and teach small practices rather than saying that, that you have an hour for this. So I know that, Lloyd, you have young kids, you have a baby. Is that right, if I remember?
4-year-old and a 1-month-old.
That's it, because last time I met you, I think that's it. So in that space, in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, you can have a really beautiful and powerful connection with your partner. And then it's saying, if we have time for everything else in life, we have time for this because we make the time. And it's about an investment in a relationship, because if that's important, then we'll do that. Because think about, for everything that's important in life, we make time. That's it.
And it's amazing how that comes, that really does go down the ranks,
Yeah, so what happens
Even
is...
the stories we all tell each other, I just got married, the baby's keeping us awake, blah, 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 You hear it all the time.
You do, yeah. I mean, it's all well and good. I have time, because I don't have to breastfeed.
Okay.
Living a different experience.
But in
When
that...
I bring these things up, time is not there.
But in that, there are 2 or 3 minutes, there is 5 minutes to have that connection. And if the relationship is important, we spoke about cultivation, and we can use the word investment as well. because when something is important to us, we put energy into it. We learn about it. We engage with it. It's exactly the same thing.
And I think the word cumulative is important because, I'm not saying you're doing this, but if you're trying to like hop on your missus every chance you get. But I think and there's a woman here actually who told a beautiful story, Melody, and about her husband, and he used to just look at her. So he'd call her into the room and he'd say, I just want to look at you. So I just think the feminine, imagine you're saying to your missus, like just holding her hand for like 2 minutes or something, just breaking the day up, I think it would have a cumulative effect, I'm sure, that over time then she'd be coming to him,
So here's the thing, because a lot of guys ask, how do I get to have more sex? And essentially this is what the question is in a way. Okay. How do you get to have more sex? It's
is that your question, like?
No. I know, but it's part of the question for a lot of men.
Can I talk to speak to that for a second? So in an effort to make sex something transformative, you need to create this space. So my desire to create this space for it to be transformative. Sex is easy. That's that happens to happen. Hallelujah. But the rest of the time, like a real connection is what I'm at.
Okay, so how do we get that? And the interesting thing is that the more open a woman's heart is, the more the sex flows. So the key is in creating moments of intimacy and moments of connection. And we do that in so many ways that have nothing to do with sex. So that's like the eye gazing. It's like the breathing. It's like the touch. But then it goes deeper into that, because it says, so in a woman's life, what can I do that might support her in some way? Because she's going to feel loved. She's going to feel seen. She's going to feel acknowledged. That makes it very different. So it's taking sex out of the context of genitals, out of a sexual experience, out of a penetrative experience, and bringing it into the fullness of life. So there's something that you said earlier, which was we have spiritual experiences, but for most of us, the spiritual experiences are separate from life experience. It's like I meditate in the morning and then I do life. Instead of spiritual is life. So if we do yoga, if yoga stays on the yoga mat, all it is then it's a form of exercise, because none of the lessons or the teaching of yoga we've taken into life. So if my meditation can be a part of life, and that's where more and more I love kind of the micro practices, the small moments of meditation. So think about what we did with the grape. Okay, this is one of my favorite practices that I teach. Not the grape, I love the grape, but it's a fabulous practice. So just now, or some of us are probably going to sit downstairs afterwards and maybe have something to eat and have a drink. So there's this whole range of sensual micro practices that bring us more into this presence. So you're going to order a drink or you're going to order something to eat. The first sip of that drink, like hold, if it's a glass of whatever it is, hold the glass in your hand and feel the weight of the glass, and maybe feel the coolness, the coldness of the glass. And before you drink, look at what's in the glass. And then take a moment to smell what's in the glass. There we go. See, Don's way ahead of everybody else here. And then when you have a sip, take the first sip of that drink and really taste that. And then drink the drink. The first sip of a meal. The first mouthful of a meal. Really taste that. Really feel. So in that awareness, something changes. So the idea is that we can use sensuality as a path of awareness and a path of spiritual practice. Okay. The more that we do that in life, the more we think about how we can be, and then how we can be in a relationship that's an expression of that. So what are the little things we can do, the little moments that start to change? That opens the heart. And the simple thing is that the more the heart of a woman is open, the more loved she feels, the more seen she feels, the more acknowledged she feels, the more that energy flows naturally downwards to have a sexual expression. And then the woman comes to you.
Are you happy with that? Okay.
I can feel a plan formulating.
Feel the what?
A plan formulating.
It's very good to keep your eye on the heart, though. You know, the way to a woman. Well, they say the way to a man's is well, they used to say it's through his belly.
Belly.
Yeah. But definitely a woman's. Would most of the women agree it's your heart?
Yes.
Okay. Now we know what to
It's
do.
kind of like sommeliers and chefs, right? They take every morsel of pleasure out of a glass of wine or a bite of food. And they're usually very passionate people. Like it's very, very
Yeah.
present in how they experience everything. They're also often artists on the side or musicians or something because it's the full experience of the senses.
That's it.
What life is all about.
Yeah.
You know, we went last night, we went to the Blondie and Sting concert, which was really, really cool at Malahide Castle. And
Actually, Blondie and Sting played last night.
yeah,
Prodigy today, apparently.
that was fabulous. It was really, we had a fabulous evening. But you watch these guys, like you watch Sting on stage, and firstly, he is so present in what he's doing.
He's a big tantra head, yeah.
Yeah, but you look at the presence that he brings to this and the absolute pleasure of his performance and the musicians that were there. There's such a performance in it. So this is what all of life is. It's no different, and sex is no different. We've just put sex, as I said, in this little box, and for most of us, the model for that is this kind of porn box. You know, where like nipples are like the dials on a radio, and we're trying to find the station, ding, 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 and then all I want to do is get inside and just pound you as hard as I can, and then ejaculate all over your face, which burns like hell if you get it in your eyes, by the way. And that's kind of the model of it. Or how many orgasms can I make you have, and how many kind of these bucket list things can we tick off because I have to make you squirt, and you know, all of these things. Instead of, it's life. So how can we connect with life?
So Tantra really is intimacy, yeah.
That's it. It's life, and it's being intimate with life. And there's the most amazing kind of metaphor of life and sex, that every time you breathe in, your breath is penetrating your body. You're taking your breath in. So can you have that moment of awareness of taking your breath in, and then there's this release of that breath, which is the moment of release. And then there's this kind of dissipation. And then there's the next breath.
Slow it all down. I actually went out with a girl when she was a sommelier, yeah, which is a wine tasting person. And we went to this restaurant, a fancy restaurant, and the guy came over, he was pouring a glass of wine. And you know, I like the whole vibe of that. Anyone else like that? You know, the red wine going into the glass, the candles, all that buzz. So he's pouring the wine, and she was cute. And she picked up the glass and she went, and she smelt the wine. I never see anybody do that because most people just taste it. So she smelt it. And then I'm expecting her to taste it, and she looked at the guy and she went, like she knew, she was speaking this different language. Like from the scent of the wine, she knew it was okay. She didn't have to taste it. I was like, this chick is unreal. I was hooked. I've never seen anybody do that, you know? And most of the time they will pour the wine for the man, or they'll kind of, you know, she took control of the whole situation. Boom. So next time you're in, just smell the wine and
Yes.
blow their mind.
So put that in a sexual context and in a tantric context, and it's an understanding that the first time you smell the wine, you're not going to smell a whole lot because your senses are not developed for that. There's a guy I know in Cape Town. He's one of the, I'm not a drinker. So for me, coffee's a thing.
You like coffee, yeah?
Yeah, so there's a guy-
Coffee is like that.
Yeah, so there's a guy in Cape Town that I know quite well who is one of the top coffee tasters in the world, and he'll tell you exactly where the coffee was grown, you know, where it was from.
And you just smell it.
But there's a sensitivity to that develops. So to understand that if we want to have that same experience in our sexual lives, in our sensual lives, in our intimacy, it takes practice. And it takes a cultivation of what's inside of us. So, you know, from Saturday, we have a whole range of workshops coming up. And the workshops are about teaching, firstly, their experiences and healing, but they're about teaching you a whole lot of practices. The power of the practice is in us doing the practice. So it's not learning about anything is absolutely fine. but it's in the doing of it. And that's what makes the difference. So it's very much a kind of a personal commitment in a way. And if you look at the idea of the grape, it's to our own sensuality first, because the more awake my sensuality is, the more I can share that with my partner.
Thanks, Lloyd, for that question. Anybody else got one? Question? Anything coming up?
Yeah, are you doing workshops and stuff this summer?
Yes. We'll talk about that at the end.
Yeah, that's a good time.
I have a question. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and for us, bridal showers and baby showers are basically to teach you about marriage and babies and whatnot, but also to help women learn how to continue having sex in their relationships. Do you have a similar sort of culture in South Africa? Because for us, it's a strange phenomenon that when a mother is sexy, gets off the list, it stays at the very top. That's what will keep you saying.
It stays at the very top where in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, how to have it, how to enjoy it, how to make space for it, and the many ways that your body is changing, and how to continue discovering new ways to keep enjoying your body and sex.
Yeah, it's exactly the same principle. Because we change over time. Our bodies change, our energy changes, desire comes and goes. And as we get older, we want, or when we learn more, we understand that there's such a range of experiences. And again, if we're doing the same thing every time, it just becomes the pattern, and after a while it becomes boring. So you have an orgasm, now what? You know, let's watch what's on Netflix instead of how can we be in that energy? How can we stay in that state? How can we go deeper and deeper and deeper into it? So it's a constant learning and a constant experience. And
how do you learn if you stop?
you don't stop.
So you discover your kids at wet.
No, you don't stop because you keep on exploring yourself. And even in my own self-pleasuring, I discover things that I've never, sometimes so subtle, sometimes so small, that are just an amazing part of my body that was never that awake or more, or that sensitive before. It's like, wow. And it's this constant exploration and discovery.
And you know, this whole thing of self-love, you know, that's like, it comes up a lot in spirituality that people, you know, they want to meet someone and it's like you got to love yourself first, and it sounds sometimes like a bit of a cliche. Talk about it within Tantra, what that means.
So it's become a cliche, and it's also become a non-truth in a way, because one of my teachers talks about the fact that most of our issues and problems exist because of two things. The first is that we weren't taught to love ourselves, and the second is that we weren't taught clear boundaries. And if we really think about that and we really look at that, we see how many of our issues and problems come from those two. So the journey of self-love is a continuous journey. It's not that now I love myself. So most of us, for example, have thoughts that we judge. So as soon as you've judged your thoughts, to be quite blunt, you're fucked, and not in a nice way. Kind of no foreplay, no lube. And that's the simple truth of it, because then we're at war with ourselves, because we're judging ourselves for what we think. And that takes us an incredibly far place from self-love. So self-love is very much a journey of the acceptance of all that we are. And that's very much the tantric practice, is the acceptance and ultimately the love of all that we are. And sometimes we only learn to love ourselves in connection with someone else. It doesn't always happen on its own. As important as that journey is, it becomes so important to understand.
So you need a reflection.
That's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we've kind of made such a thing about being needy. Fuck that. It's so important to have love, and it's so important to want love and to need love and to want touch and to want intimacy and to want connection, and not be this kind of island in the middle of nowhere that you can do it all on your own. And that's not who we are. We're meant to live in connection. Our nervous systems need connection, and they need touch. They need that intimacy. And it's a need. It's not something that we want. We don't understand the power of that. You know, during COVID, mental health issues have risen and suicides have risen to levels never seen in the world before, because there was such isolation.
Yeah.
And because we've made such a thing of not having touch, of not having connection, and you can only be touched by this person in this way, instead of,
Connection will kill you.
I'm going to tell you something, Don, it's really simple. Life will kill you. That's it. We're all going there anyway. Okay, that's a given. The moment that we are born, that's it. So a big part of Tantra is having an intimate connection with death. Then we can live. But this is where the idea of destruction becomes so important, because life is this life of destruction and creation all the time. So we're destroying aspects of ourselves that don't have a place in life anymore as we grow. We're saying goodbye to aspects of ourselves, and we're opening to more life and to different life. And our sensuality, intimacy, becomes such an amazing way to experience that. As there's more of me, I can share more, I can show more, I can receive more. Oh, this is deep stuff.
Oh, nice.
I don't have a question actually, I just wanted to say
You just want to put your hand.
thank you. I wanted to say thank you because you described an experience I had a few times that I didn't understand, and I've never had anyone talk about it. That experience of the energy of men and then two people joining spiritually has happened to me a few times. It's magical, and I kept wanting to recreate that with my husband. And unfortunately, he died before we could go higher, do more things. But I just wanted to say thank you for describing it, because I knew what it was, and I talked to Note about it. But every time I told people, they looked at me like, "What's wrong with this person? There's something wrong with you." And you talked about it, and I just wanted to say thank you. I'm not crazy. I actually did experience that.
Thank you. And you know, a lot of us have these kind of experiences. They happen to us at some point. Like a lot of women have, especially when they're young, a lot of women ejaculate. And they don't know what it is. So they think that they've weed in the bed, and then they get all embarrassed, and then their partner gets embarrassed, and they don't know what to do. So they shut that down. So we have a lot of experiences like that. And when we can learn about them, we can actually learn how to make them more conscious, and how we can go more and more to those places, because they require a practice. We do it once, or it happens, and now how do we have that oneness, that unity, or that deep pleasure on a more regular, in a more repeatable way? And that's the learning and the practice.
Anyone else? Helga, you coming in there? No? Nope. Sorry. Brandon, you anything there? Lloyd?
Thanks. So something came up there when we were talking about tasting coffee. So my girlfriend is a coffee cube grader, right? So everyone she knows is in the industry of coffee primarily. And there's a guy who won the coffee tasting championships for the last few years, and he's playing the new one. And he cut out all forms of garlic, ginger, everything for months and months and months, so he could taste this properly, right? So just taking that as an example, as a metaphor, what is sensible to remove in order to be able to sense more in tantric practice?
The answer is the opposite. It's not what to remove, it's what to include.
Okay.
So it's about saying yes to pretty much everything. And in the yes, with awareness and with consciousness, we become more aware of the possibility and the subtlety of pretty much everything. So we find ultimately what expands us and what contracts us. So if something contracts you, that's something to probably say no to. Like, what contracts your relationship, what expands your relationship. And in that, it's about being inclusive, not exclusive. So there's a concept that I teach. It's called, essentially it's healing and growing by adding. So the way that we live generally is we try not to do something. And we try to stop something. But the inner drives that we have are often so strong that you often don't have a chance of that. So if you try and add something instead of trying to stop something, you're doing something more. You're bringing your focus to something different. So there's a saying that attention or energy flows where attention goes. So if my attention is on stopping something, it's a contraction.
There's a lot in the literature around, embodiment for men is about abstinence from this, that, and the other. Like, don't watch this, and don't engage in that. And so there's a lot of that kind of restrictive energy, and therefore comes a lot of judgment, right? And judgment obviously will spin you out, take you out of presence and stuff. So, yeah, that's very valuable.
Yeah, so the more that
you include it, then, don't you?
That's it. And the more that you open your heart, the less space there is for a lot of those other things. Because you're living more in presence, and you do that as a more natural expression rather than trying to stop something. Because then, exactly as you said, Lloyd, then there's all of this judgment. As soon as that judgment's there, you're at war with yourself, because then you're not good enough. And why did you do this? And then you failed. And then you go into this whole downward spiral instead of, okay, this is what I did. If I put more attention in being present, I'm going to do less of that as a natural flow, not as trying to force it or make it happen.
A really good thing, we had Betty Martin, do you know that lady?
Yes.
She's kind of famous in the whole world of
The Wheel of Consent.
Wheel of Consent in Tantric. And she came into an event years ago, and she would get you to sit with a partner, and the partner would say they were going to do all sorts of stuff to you, right? Crazy shit. And she said, you have to say no to everything the person says, right? And feel the energy in your body. Then you have to say yes to everything the person says. So the person would say they're going to, do whatever. I had Mick Sawtell, who lives up the road, going to do all these things to me in the shower or something. And I have to go, yes. I have to just go, yes, Mick, let's go, right? And what happened was, I got in touch with my energy rather than my mental process. Because sometimes I'd be saying yes, and I go, oh, that actually sounds all right. So it was like an energetic, you know what I mean? It was a very interesting process. Yeah. And she taught that. She was quite famous, I believe,
yeah. So what we say yes to and what we say no to is really interesting. The yes, whether we say yes or whether we say no to so many things actually matters very little. What does matter is, where does the yes or no come from? Does the yes or no come from love, or does the yes or no come from fear? So if I say to Gabby, let's go and do this, and she says yes, but it's not something that she wants to do, but she wants me to stay, so she's going to say yes. That's a yes out of fear. It's not a yes out of love.
Yeah, Carla.
So, kind of a part B to Lloyd's last question, but last weekend I was at a biohacking conference about, health optimization stuff. And one of the speakers I went to see, she's a tantric therapist, sexologist, and she uses ketamine, MDMA, and mushrooms to help couples remove the filters and bypass the whole mental parts of their reptilian brain, so that they can learn to connect freely, and then take it home after they've had the experience of what it's supposed to be like. How do you feel about these extras? The ketamines, the MDMAs, the mushroom.
Ketamine is a horse tranquilizer, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I know.
They told me it isn't.
It isn't, no?
I don't know.
Is it, yeah?
It's being used a lot in therapy.
Yeah.
Have you got some on you, or just no?
No, that's the vet at home if you want. You get it from the vet, yeah.
You get it from the vet.
If you pretend to be a farmer, you can get it for your horse or goat.
Okay, so get some wellies,
Yeah.
and off you go to the. Okay.
Good question, Carla. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm going to give you a very personal opinion on this. Okay. Firstly, I'm really partial to mushrooms.
I think there's a lot of people on your, your team over there.
Absolutely.
Coffee and mushrooms.
Are mushrooms a good combo with Tantra?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but
Oh, yeah.
Next party event.
okay, but here's the thing, and this is important. A lot of these things come up at the moment, and they're kind of a fad in the moment. Okay, so like ketamine is the new thing in therapy, and it's not only in being used sexually or in couples work, it's the new kind of fad in healing. We have to understand this. If you look at something like the tantric practices, these have been around for over 6,000 or 7,000 years. Okay, there's something in that says there's a substance there, and I'm not talking about a substance as in the mushrooms. It has a substance, it has something in it that has worked for so long. So if we understand that, it says that this is a therapy, it's not a therapy, this is a method that has worked. And it's not so much as a method, more as a practice that has worked for so long. So it has a value. Things come along as a fad in this that will come and go. The purpose of a lot of these substances, as in the mushrooms, is that they will help shift our awareness, they'll help shift our consciousness, they'll open something. The key is that that is the doorway into something. So if you go and you have a big mushroom experience, that opens the doorway, then you do the work that comes from that. Because that's just a doorway in. It's not sustainable to have huge mushroom experiences constantly because it's not sustainable. You can't live like that. So when you understand that that's a way in, then you do the work, then you do the practices. The interesting thing is that the deepest experiences of intimacy will happen without any substance, without anything else, when you are stone cold sober and absolutely 100,000% of your being is present and connected. That's when you will have the intimacy and union with life.
Yeah, because when there's a substance involved, there's always something not quite right.
There's a story, there's so many things. So it's beautiful, and they're beautiful experiences. I love them, I work with them sometimes, and they are so powerful. But the most amazing connection is feeling your partner's heart with every cell of your being. That is indescribable. That you can only do in absolute presence.
Because I study shamanism as well, but in the practice that I've been taught, there's no sex, there's also no caffeine or alcohol or anything that might either influence your energy or invade your energy for 3 days before and at least 3 days after.
Yeah, so a lot of people,
in that container.
you know, a lot of people who do deep experiences will have that kind of dieteta for a month. You know, if you go and you do some of the ayahuasca experiences, you'll have that sometimes for 2 months before. They all have a purpose. And the understanding is that those experiences open a doorway. You have to step into the doorway, and then you have to be with everything that's in the room. Because a lot of the mushroom experiences are deep and dark, and they show us things that are fucking terrifying sometimes, you know? But the experience of Tantra is that life is going to be beautiful, and then life is going to be horrendous. Because that's what it is for all of us in some way.
Yeah.
So they're a portal to something. They're not everything.
We're in our last couple of minutes now, right? So before we go, just to give both the men and the women 2 tips each before they go, that you would just say, these are gems, go and try them out. Let's start with the women.
Well, it's actually going to be pretty much the same for men and women.
Okay.
The next time you have a sexual or a pleasure experience, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with a partner, focus on your heart center. Forget about the rest of your body. Forget about your genitals. Forget about everything. Forget about your partner. Focus totally on your heart center. And how do you do that? You do that by breathing into your heart, like we did in the very beginning. Except focus on the breath moving into your heart center, focus on the breath moving out of your heart center. And immediately that's going to change your experience enormously. The Second one is this, to think about what it is that you want from the experience, because if we want the same thing every day, we're not even looking at the menu. How am I feeling now, and what is the expression of that? So part of me is an erotic savage. I love to play in the world of bondage. I don't want to do that every day, because that's not who I am every day. There's times where I want that, and there's times where I want to be held and cuddled. And there's times where I want to fucking come and walk away. And there's times where I want 5 hours of pleasure and massage and touch and everything else. So what do I want today? And that's being in the present moment, and it's being in the sexual moment, and it's being in the moment of life.
2 tips each. That work for you? Yes. Okay. So before we go, tell people what you're doing. You're doing workshops and stuff, yeah?
We are doing a whole lot of wonderful stuff. On Saturday we have a day that's called My Sexual Self, which is just for women. And it's really about exploring and understanding much more of female sexuality, of the connection between your body and your heart, a lot of really deep yoni anatomy, and that's where all of the other, like all the pleasure points, A spot, P spot, all of those, we're going to talk about all of those.
I'll tell you, the map he has. Has anyone else heard of a K spot? I never heard of a K spot. See, there's always more, and isn't that fabulous? Find out where the K spot
So
is. So that's Saturday.
that's on Saturday. Yeah. Sunday it's a wonderful day. It's called How to Become a Masterful Lover, and it's really a lot about sexual practices. So it's a lot about, somebody asked me to put it in like a really quick sentence the other day. I was at an expo I did in Cape Town a few weeks ago. I said, it's really simple. You're going to learn, you're going to learn, you're going to learn, and that's what you're going to learn. So it's, it's like a masterclass on sexual practices and techniques. So it's about oral sex for men and women. It's about how to have the most amazing penetration. And then it's really whatever questions you bring, which might be about bondage, kink, fantasies, anal play, you name it, and we go there. So it's a really fun and interesting day.
Yeah, it's go anywhere, yeah.
Yeah,
Everything.
and it's...
Where on Sunday?
Yeah, will he be going to?
I'm going to tell you now. Then on Monday night, we are doing an event with Yvonne. Who knows you? You know Yvonne?
Yvonne? Where's she from?
Yvonne Skelly.
Oh yeah, in Nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So doing an event at the Hollywood Forest Yoga Center,
Okay.
and that's called The Essence of Sensuality. It's a practical workshop, but there's no nudity in it. So it's using movement, touch, sound, breath to connect and experience energy and sensuality. That's fabulous. Then we are having a rest for a few days, bless you.
And you do one-on-one sessions as
Yes,
well for people, yeah?
I am available for one-on-one sessions. Then the next weekend, which starts on the Friday the 7th, I think. Is that right? Friday the 7th. It's the most amazing weekend of your life. I promise you. Friday night, Expanded Energy Orgasm. That's the workshop that you came to last time. So say a few words about how amazing and wonderful it was.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one.
So that's next Friday night. Yeah, that's next Friday night. The Saturday after that is Conscious Sensual Massage, which is full body sensual tantric massage. Practical workshop. And on the Sunday is something called the Taoist Sexual Healing Massage. And that's a very powerful practice of exploring and using sexual energy as a force for healing, for creativity, for meditation. One of the most powerful healing practices that I use.
Okay.
And that's
your
what we have at
website,
the
if
moment.
Anybody wants to check?
Yes, they're on the website,
Yeah.
but we can also give a email address or whatever it
Do you have
is.
a flyer with you? No.
No, we don't.
Okay.
But if anybody wants information, just come to Gabby afterwards and she'll take your email address and give you the information. All of the workshops, except for the Monday night, are at the Soul Sanctuary in Wicklow. The Monday night with Yvonne is at the Hollywood Forest Yoga Center. I think that's what it's called.
I think it's
So
best.
the exception of
Blessington, yes.
one of them is for women only, and the rest are for
Everybody.